right. Good morning, America. Let's get started with this webinar on cybersecurity essentials for small business specifically. And my name's Mike Ritsema. I'm a partner here at i3 Business Solutions, 25 years in the industry and passionate about technology. I'm here with James Lijewski, and James is managing 70 firewalls here at i3 Business Solutions, monitoring and managing. And he's a resident expert on all things security. So let's get started. Glad you're able to join us. I like to pause just for a minute in these discussions and say, let's think for a moment what organizations and businesses are trying to accomplish, the owners, the executives in an organization. And probably one of the first things every executive is managing is risk, and that's financial, physical, and technological risk. And, let's make sure we don't go bankrupt, don't go all GM and Chrysler. Let's manage the financial risk. Let's manage things walking out the back door. And then technologically, if we get hit by a fire or tornado or some sort of massive virus, let's make sure we can get back in business. Secondly, productivity. Can we do more with less? Third, profitability. Are we making enough money to be sustainable? And then innovation, how can I be different than the other guys? So that's the context for these conversations. We understand that business is business. And the way we get business done is with people, process, and technology. Today we're going to talk a lot about people and technology and the impact that security has on those areas. So when we work with small businesses especially, we talk about three things. It's CIA. And with information, we want confidentiality. So the security layers, the authority that we give individuals protects the confidentiality of the information. Who has access to the data? So we want to make sure that we have the confidentiality. And that's part of the context of today's conversation. Secondly, integrity. Where is it? We talk about integration of information, not islands. So if I've got 2, 3, 4 copies of information, if I've got it in an Access database, in an ERP system, or in my main software, if I've got it in an Excel spreadsheet, well, which one is the correct answer? So we need integrity of information and confidentiality. But lastly, availability. And we've seen this in the past. We had a customer in the past that was not a bank. They were not a financial institution, but their email was protected so tightly nobody could even get email on their cell phones. And that was an example of, my goodness, can we figure out how to get some work done here and give people access, availability to their information? So it's confidentiality, integrity of the information, but also availability. We need to get work done, especially in a small business. So the headlines just last year, this story is fascinating. I think it was the Bank of Bangkok that got hit for $81 million. It came in through actually a vendor's piece of software, a vulnerability in the software, $81 million gone. We'll talk about other ways that money can leak out of your organization, but we know corporate breaches have happened all across the world, all across America. We hear about them every month. But again, we're talking about small business. What can we do in a small business to protect our organizations? And in that context, what we'll talk about today is layers of security. And with our customers, oftentimes, or let's just say in the past few years, when we come out with new ways to protect the organization, it's like, well, I thought you had us covered here. Why do I need this? And the answer is layers of security. We're gonna protect your organization in multiple and different ways. First layer being cloud DNS. Let's make sure if they click on the link, something says wrong. We know that's a bad website out there. Cloud DNS. Firewall. Let's protect the perimeter of our network, the perimeter of our company from the bad guys all over the world. Back up your stuff. We'll get into that in depth. Antivirus, spam, malware. Let's make sure we've got up-to-date antivirus and spam protection. And then OS updates. This is fascinating as we're running into this more and recently that, oops, the vulnerability came from something as simple as a server or a PC or a laptop update of security on the operating system. And then lastly, educate your team. So I'll turn it over to James to get into a little bit more on number one.
Yep. So this is one example of something that you want to be protecting yourself against. And this is one variant of some ransomware that was rampant about a year or two ago. So this is what a lot of people would be seeing. They would get into their computer and they'd see that shock and awe of, oh, all your files are encrypted. Click on this link. You need to pay us $300, $500, $1,000 to get this data unencrypted so you can actually access it and continue on with your business. And a lot of times you'll pay that money and you actually might not even be able to recover your data. So even if you're paying them, you're not guaranteed results. So the most important thing to really worry about up front is, do you have good backups? Are you sure those backups are good? Do you have an offsite copy just in case your local copy somehow also got infected that you can restore from? There's a lot of different backup types. You can do image or file based. And then are you putting your offsite backup out to the cloud, or are you having a technician take it to an offsite location somewhere nearby? You also want an increment hourly. And in addition to running your backups, you need to actually be testing them on a regular basis to make sure that you can actually restore from them. We've seen cases in the past where people have thought their backups were good. They were getting an actual report saying they were valid. But lo and behold, when they tried to restore in a disaster scenario, those backups were in fact not working. So one thing we do here at i3 is we're actually testing the backups on a regular basis to make sure that they're valid. We have an automated system where once every week or so, we'll actually take that backup image, mount it on a virtual disk, and actually boot it up to see if it boots up and you get to the login screen. This will give us a very good test whether or not they are valid, or if there are issues we can actually remediate before that disaster comes to fruition. One other thing you want to be protecting yourself against is end user accidents. One thing that got to be pretty big in the news back in May of this year was that there was a massive Google Docs phishing attack going on. So once one person got infected, it infected all their contacts, and then so on and so on. And basically they would click on a link to open in Docs, and you would accidentally give somebody else permission to your email account. And while you think my email account isn't that important, your own personal one, but who knows what you have linked to that? Do you have linked to your Amazon account for all your purchasing? Do you have your personal Gmail account linked to a domain renewal for whatever reason? You need to think about everything that could be tied to that account if it became compromised. As I said, that attack happened early in May. As soon as people were getting infected, we realized that the infection appeared to be coming from actually one of your contacts. So it did appear to be, one of your friends, one of your colleagues sending you this message. So it seemed legitimate. In just about 1 hour, it infected over 1 million users. So the best thing to recommend for yourself or any of your coworkers as a briefing would be, if you're not expecting an invite, you're not expecting to get an invitation to a document, question it. If it seems suspicious, seems a little bit out of the ordinary, just stop, text, physically go talk to that person and say, hey, were you trying to send me this, or is this not legitimate at all?
Which is a perfect segue to priority number 2. And as we move through technology, I say technology marches on. And we're far enough along in technology, and many organizations are strong enough with their checklist to have a lot of these things in place, operating system updates, antivirus, and so on. So things change. And where we're at today is, number one, let's make sure you've got a good backup so that if something goes wrong, you can fix it. But secondly, we need to educate users, because exactly what James is talking about here, and that is, users make mistakes. A second major vulnerability to organizations is vendors that are involved and vendors making a mistake. So educate users, and part of that education, like James said, is be skeptical, be paranoid, question, question authority. You get that email, be skeptical about the source. And so James will talk in a few minutes about a password manager, but certainly pause a moment right now and think to yourself, do I have the same password for, my Facebook account, maybe my Twitter account, maybe my personal Gmail, business Gmail, a credit card, or a bank account? If you've got the same password for any one of those six, I submit you have a major challenge, and you need a password manager. You need a means to manage your passwords so that you don't compromise your information. So this is Bruce Snyder is considered the Chuck Norris of cybersecurity. And he says, if you think technology can solve your security problems, then you don't understand technology. And that's where we're at today is, we think if we have this amazing firewall and this amazing antivirus and spam protection, cool, we're good. No, we still have a vulnerability, and that is in the form of people. So when educating users, here's 3 bullets from Krebs on Security, another authority in the security space. And if you didn't go looking for it, don't install it. So when that pop-up, like James said, when you get that email saying, hey, Google Doc update or download this update, hold on. Let's pause and think, did I ask for this install? And then secondly, if you install it, update it. And certainly that's a big part of what we're talking about here, and that is making sure that security patches on the operating system, antivirus, it's fine to have an antivirus installed. But if it hasn't been updated in the last week or month or 3 months, then it's worthless. And then lastly, if you no longer need it, remove it. Get it off your system. So I'll turn it over to James here to talk a little bit about password management.
Yeah, so as Mike had said, you don't want password duplicates, something that a lot of people are guilty of, even myself in recent years. Just because it's simple, it's easy, and then you go to a new website, you log in, you know what your password is. But there's a problem with that is as soon as a lot of these password breaches that have been in the news lately, as soon as you see those happen, you're like, oh, my LinkedIn account is now compromised. Well, a lot of people on the web that are nefarious will go and find out what that password is. And if you're using first name, last name at gmail.com, they will try that same password on your Gmail account, your Amazon account, eBay, you name it, and then just, if they log in, they can start making purchases, ship it to a different address, and by that time, the damage has already been done. So the one thing we would recommend is using a password manager. And in addition to that, if you're using a password manager, think of it as you've got, one minor flaw is that password has to be very, very secure. Because once they've opened that gate, they've got, keys of the kingdom, so to say. So you need to make sure that password is secure, not guessable, but something that only you can be able to remember. And in addition to that, we try and strive for process excellence, especially using checklists. And this can go from very different processes within your company, as simple as ordering a part that has to come through and documenting how that goes through your organization, who does what along the way. And another part would be more on the IT side where, if an employee is terminated or leaves, we need to make that a priority one, almost as high of a priority as the company being down, because if that employee leaves and we don't get around to changing his password, removing that email account on their mobile device, which a lot of times can be missed by a lot of IT departments. They've still got access to all their emails that were at work, and can still, if they were in charge of whatever department, they can still make nefarious purchases, depending on if their termination doesn't go as well, in their opinion. So you need to be cautious of your current employees when they leave, to make sure that you're covering your own bases, to be better secure on your end.
Yeah, checklist, just to add to that, I mean, checklist process excellence, I think, is the journey of every business. And at i3, it's certainly the very narrow focus within the technology environment. And so in small business today, if you don't have a full-time IT manager who's focused on this checklist around everything from antivirus to operating system updates to education to password management, access, etc. These amazing checklists, that's a vulnerability for your organization. That's part of what we do well here relative to technology, is making sure that that checklist is followed over and over and over again. We take it for granted here. So spear phishing is social engineering. And we've all heard of phishing, and the bad guys are getting more focused, and they're getting very good at finding money. And certainly the encryption, the crypto wall, the various ransomware is a big way of how they're doing that. But things are evolving also. They're using other means to acquire money from organizations, and I'll describe that in a minute. But certainly spear phishing is very targeted. If I can find your email address, if I could create a website that looks like US Bank, but there's one letter off. If I know that you're working with a given bank or a credit card, I could target you in a very specific way, and I could use a website that is just one letter off, and I could go directly at your organization. If I can get to LinkedIn and figure out who has responsibility in the organization, I just found the executive secretary to an executive, and I can target that person because I've got their name, and I figured out the email convention at the company. I've got a lot of good information to move forward. I say phishing, this one's personal, because somebody actually did a few years ago file a state of Michigan tax return using my social security number. Now, some say that's just a mistake. Somebody made a mistake by one social security number, but I had to deal with a bunch of stuff for years and years. But certainly we know that people are filing fraudulent income tax returns and acquiring money from that. But we mentioned in the webinar that we could save you $10,000, and we have multiple stories and examples of this. And certainly we know of prospective customers, organizations in West Michigan that have lost money, we know of one organization where a vendor of theirs lost $40,000, specifically with the spear phishing method we're talking about. And that is, they spoofed this customer's name, sent an email, or the vendor's name, sent an email to one of their customers, asked for the movement of ACH funds. And the funds moved $40,000. Then they contacted our customer and said, I thought we paid that invoice. So that is spear phishing at its highest form. That is not ransomware. That is a very direct access to funds being moved to a bank account. We've had other customers that internally had the safeguards in place and actually thrashed about the movement of funds and had 2 or 3 people talking about saying, and one person saying, do I move these funds or not? And they got through it and decided not to move the funds. So I want to caution you, if you're involved in any way with overseas trade, foreign countries, that's where your biggest vulnerability is. If you're buying things from China, if you're buying things from overseas and then you're paying different accounts for that, be very careful, very cautious about that. One of the books we love here and recommend is called The E-Myth Revisited, the story of Vern Harnish, who was in Russia speaking when $400,000 was moved in 3 different transactions using exactly this method, an email with his accounting manager. It's out on the web. Go search for it. Vern Harnish and the targeted loss. He's written extensively about it. So I was surprised as we learned more about this. We called our bank in here, sat down with our bank, and ACH debit block is a way to authorize specific accounts for transfer of funds. And for a whopping, can you believe it, for small business, $10 a month, we have ACH debit block in place. So if somebody tries to move money into an account that is not on that list, the bank will not move it. And the second banking service that's out there is called Positive Pay. Positive Pay is a little bit overkill for us. It basically says when we write checks or when we authorize checks through the bank, that before the funds move, they will send us a list of the checks that are being requested to cash. And it gets a little more in depth, and we decided not to do that. But there's 2 layers of protection that can be put in place in your accounting department, and we highly recommend looking at that. But then secondly, the education side of, boy, I need to train my users in a lot of different areas. So education is high on the list of recommendations, and specifically around spear phishing, because your your employees are being targeted right now, as are ours. Ours have been targeted for specifically technical requests that they've had to work through. I'll turn it over to James to talk about the firewall.
Yep. So another layer of security that was mentioned earlier in the presentation was firewall and cloud DNS, which are 2 services that we help provide some of our clients. I did a quick report this morning to see where and how many attempts were trying to get into our business just yesterday from midnight to midnight. And it looks like just under 40,000 hits or attempts were made. A lot of times they're trying to see if we have a vulnerability, something that we're allowing anybody in the world to get access to our office. A lot of times people will be checking to see if a website that we might be hosting internally has some vulnerability. And there's a lot of different technical things that we could get into, but a lot of times they're just looking for that vulnerability and then seeing what's there, and then they will plan their attack from there. The other thing that we're managing is cloud DNS for our clients. I did also another check this morning to see what was all blocked yesterday. And for all of our clients, it looks like there were 4 botnets that were blocked. So that would be some device that may have a virus on it that's attempting to go to some command and control center, somewhere out on the web, and then be nefariously used for attacks. And we can even see that a lot of malware was blocked. I think this is mostly from a handful of PCs that we're actively working on currently to get uninfected or removed from their network. But we can see that there were 8,000 requests that malware was on somebody's PC going out to the web or trying to redirect them to another website and accidentally click on something that could potentially get them infected with a virus. So the threat is out there. It's always going on. Layers of protection are always really good to, if one thing doesn't catch it, usually another thing will. The more layers you have, the better.
All right, let's talk a little bit about integration, not islands. And we added this to a security, I added this to a security webinar because in organizations, studies have been done of major corporations where they ask the CIO how many cloud applications are in their environment. And the average CIO answers somewhere around 50. and the answer from the survey came back at well over 300. And what kind of items are those? And it's everything from Dropbox to Slack to Trello to Box.com, using Google for various things, going out and find a project management site, finding, expense reporting. Employees they're going out and figure out how to get stuff done, and they're using these services. And oftentimes they're uploading valuable company information to these websites. So what we end up with is islands of information all over the place, and security challenges around managing the logins and who has this login, and boy, is there a duplicate password, and where's my data, where's my information, who's it shared with. I'll never forget it was about 4 years ago, going into a local attorney's office to talk about information and technology, and he said, "Can you help me get my arms around? I mean, I've got customers and sharing information with me on Dropbox, on Box, on Google, on Drive, on Apple. I don't know how to manage this." And I thought, my goodness, that is a security risk. Oops, I just shared your personal legal information with 12 people by accident is a major risk. So integration of information where I can manage the security across smartphones, mobile devices, laptops, networks, and where your company data is. So that integration in a platform, like Apple, like an SAP type product, like a Google, like a Microsoft Office 365, we start narrowing down where our information is and give us the ability to manage it, manage the security of it more effectively. So we'll start summarizing here and saying, pretty straightforward, and especially for small business. Number one, confirm your backups. Number two, educate your team. Don't click on that questionable link. Number three, confirm layers of protection in your organization, and make sure you're following checklist process excellence to keep everything up to date so that the latest zero-day vulnerability doesn't hit you. Beware of spear phishing. Educate your finance team, especially, to watch for these emails and be paranoid. And to, like James said, text, phone proactively. And actually, in one case, they did have the safeguard in place. They actually called the bank to make sure that this was okay, but that was the wrong call to make, is to the bank to say, hey, should I transfer these funds? Because the bank basically said, yeah, that's a good account. If you want to transfer them, we'll transfer them. So those internal text, phone calls, walking down the hall before moving funds around. And then integration, not islands. Where's your data? So those are the action or the mandates. And then two things that i3 can do for you, and one is a phishing test. I mean, part of what we can do is initiate some actions on your behalf and contact us to see if you qualify for that kind of phishing type test. And then secondly, a risk and security assessment across your organization. And we have a systematic process for coming in and looking at vulnerabilities and putting together an executive report that you can share with your executive team. And that's what we do. i3, Intelligent Information Integration. We integrate technology solutions. Why? To accelerate organizational results. We'll open it up for questions here, and let's see if we do have any questions. I'll go to the chat and take a look. And we do have a question here. It's, can't antivirus or spam blockers stop phishing or spear phishing emails? I think I'm going to let James handle that one. It's pretty narrow.
Yeah, I would say antivirus doesn't take care of everything. Then antivirus is only as good as the definitions that it's scanning for. If there was something new that just came out, something that one person only created that isn't very widely known, your antivirus is not going to be picking that up. So that's why you need that multiple layers of protection.
Yeah. These are the zero-day attacks. These are the morphing IP addresses and websites that haven't been caught by any of the antivirus, any of the spam protection, any of the services out there yet. So that answer is no, and that's why we have layers of security and why education is so important. These bad guys are out there, and they're smart. So that's it. We say at i3, technology marches on. Embrace the cloud. I mean, there is amazing productivity and opportunity in the cloud for organizations, but do it safely. Protect your organization. Make sure you're detecting when problems occur, and make sure you're responding to those vulnerabilities. Thanks for joining us on this cybersecurity webinar.